So good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy lives to join us today. My name is Liza Bair.
And I'm Diana Maskell, and we are both elementary math methods professors at Buffalo State College here in Buffalo, New York.
Our session today is part of Buffalo State's PDS's All Hands on Deck, or AHOD series. Grounded in the belief that together we can do more, AHOD seeks to leverage the resources of Buffalo State PDS and its campus and school partners to more fully and deliberately address the varying needs of local educational communities at a unique time in education, and global, since we have some international friends today. AHOD provides a cohesive professional development plan for the year, one that is sustained, meaningful, that responds to the needs identified by you guys, PDS stakeholders, and is framed in a co-teaching and co-learning model that considers the ways each stakeholder can contribute and support our learners and their families throughout the school year. The focus of our session is elementary math strategy, so hopefully you're in the right place. And in today's session, we will discuss math community.
We are really excited to get to know who's with us today. So if you could just take a few moments to type in the chat your name, your role, and perhaps your school or district affiliation, that will help us to get to know the community that's online with us this afternoon. See some faculty, welcome.
Brenna, woohoo, student teaching.
It's a big deal, Brenna. Hi, Heather.
Hey, Callie. Oh, congratulations, Paulo. All right, it looks like we have a lot of people in a lot of different roles and from a lot of different places. So we are so glad that you're here. One thing we just want to mention, if you are into Twitter, we do have a hashtag AHODMath. So if you want to tweet during our presentation or after, you can definitely go ahead and utilize that to keep the conversation going. Since we are going to be talking to you about math community today, we're really curious about what community means to you. So we're going to do a warm-up word cloud. You can either join by the web, the directions on the screen, or by text. And I'm actually going to drop the link to it in the chat too, so you don't have to type in the website. So just give me a moment to do that. Since it is a word cloud, I encourage you to type in one-word responses, and you can type in more than one response. So the link is in the chat if you want to utilize that. And we'll just give you a few minutes to do that. Great, I see a lot of responses coming in. Keep them coming. We're smiling because this word cloud is getting pretty big over here, but we finished that up, type in a few more words, and we are going to show you this word cloud a little bit later. So finish up your responses and we will come back to it in a bit. All right. So part of AHOD is all these amazing professional development sessions. And I know I've attended a lot of professional development sessions with a lot of great ideas, and I write them all down and I think in my head, that's an amazing idea, but I don't always put the ideas into action and sustain that PD. So we designed our session with you in mind, teachers. We're going to be featuring 11 great ideas today. ones that you can use, modify, adapt to meet the needs of your students in your classroom. And so we hope to inspire you to try new things today, but we don't want you to feel pressured to try to do everything because we don't think that that's sustainable or realistic. So as you're listening and reflecting on all of our ideas and your practice and your students, we'd love for you to set a goal today of just choosing one of these ideas to implement in September in your classroom. So we'll come back to that goal setting a little bit later. The other thing that I always think about when I go to professional development sessions is I want that resource. Can you share it? And so we have created a resource document that we're going to share with you at the end of the session today, linking all of our links and ideas so that you can take that, print that out, and implement some of them in your classroom this year.
Thanks, Liza. As she mentioned earlier, we're going to discuss math community today. So in this session, we're going to be answering a couple of questions. Number one, who are our students and their families? We really want to get to know them, and how can we do that? Number two, who are we as a community of math learners, and where are we going at this point in the school year? We're just starting out. We're really excited about the fall, so we need to think ahead.
We want to take a moment to talk about Doug Fisher's book, Rebound. If you hopefully were able to catch his session last night, it was really inspiring. If not, there should be a recording available. So check back on the Buffalo State PDS website for that. And I don't know if it is Fixita and Kelly, but we will get it to you if we can, if you missed that PD last night. But Doug Fisher talks a lot about rebuilding student agency in his book. We believe it's our job as teachers to help students feel confident when they come to our math classrooms. Math anxiety is already a really big thing that we have to deal with as teachers, and it can present itself at such a young age, unfortunately, in our students. And then thinking about the past year, student agency really took a hit. Some of our more vulnerable students were affected by many things outside of their control, economic hardships, lack of access to reliable internet, sickness, racial injustice, lack of academic supports. So we're kind of starting the school year off with a variety of students with a variety of agencies. And despite these challenges, we know that educators and students are super resilient and that this year is about rebounding. So our question is kind of, what if we could be intentional about creating a math community that honors students' identities, families, and builds a supportive and supported community of learners. So we want all of our students to see themselves as mathematicians, and we want students to have agency in math. We want them to engage in productive struggle. We want them to take risks. We want them to explain their thinking out loud in front of the class. And so we want them to have a positive math identity. So we have to ask ourselves, who are our students? What are their identities? And how does that impact our instruction? We're going to be giving you some more bright ideas in this section to help you find out more about your students' math identities. But math identities are complicated. So it's not something that you can do just in one day and figure out a student all in one day. And so we encourage you to try out these different ideas over the course of the month, but also just use observation and things that teachers normally do when you're doing math tasks and other things to pick up those little, hints about what a student thinks about themselves as a mathematician. And then the other thing is just a warning is that we know sometimes these getting to know you type of activities can be time fillers, and we want them to be really meaningful. So we want to make every second of instruction count. So think about how these activities will help you learn more about your students. And also how you're going to use this info to inform your instruction. So our first bright idea is to get to know your students in a math way. I used to be a third grade teacher, and I loved getting to know you activities in my classroom because my students just absolutely love talking about themselves and were so proud of their families and their communities. So I used to do an activity called a bag of me, and my students could bring in 5 items that represented them and their lives. But when I began teaching math methods at Buffalo State, I really wanted to incorporate a getting to know activity that was a little more math focused. So I partner with a really amazing mentor teacher, Mrs. Jenna at Tapestry Charter School. And in the pandemic, we've had to really, learn new things and shift our knowledge of technology. And so Miss Jenna shared with us last year this activity called Figure Me Out. And so teachers can first present this activity about themselves, and then students can create one to share with the class. This activity has kind of been around for a while. I know I used to do this on like a poster board with sticky notes, but I love how Miss Jenna used Google Slides. And then the idea of this is that students figure out the clues, and then you can move these boxes around to display kind of the answer or a picture. And so we think it's a great idea for teachers to model, and then students could do this with their families. We are going to share this link with you. I actually made one for every grade level as an example. So you can take that away and use it in your classroom.
Our second bright idea is to conduct math surveys. And the beginning of the year is a perfect time to get to know your students and their families. During the pandemic, a lot of teachers decided to use Google Forms, and that's a great way to get to know students and check in with them regularly. Students play an important role in our classrooms. And their beliefs play an even more important, a greater role in our classroom. They encourage children to self-assess their own levels of engagement. So when we're giving surveys to students, they can assess their levels of engagement with tasks, their perseverance or their avoidance of problems, as well as how they respond to struggle. Surveys can help you uncover these beliefs, and for kids, there are no right or wrong answers when they're answering a survey. So it's personal, it's between the teacher and the student. And when people in general take surveys, that anxiety that surrounds like a test or correctness is removed. So that's why we like to give them. But math surveys in particular teach us a lot about who students are as learners, as well as their attitudes towards math. And we think of giving surveys at the beginning of the year, but if we're really focused on growth, I encourage you to consider ways that you can use surveys throughout the year and periodically, because beliefs can change over time. So especially if we're giving those rich math tasks, we do want to check in with those students more frequently throughout the year. On this slide are some examples of beliefs that you can include in your math surveys, and they were taken from John Sangiovanni and his colleagues' book, Productive Math Struggle. So I want you to take just a few moments and read through some of these statements, and I'll give you about 10 seconds to look them over.
See Paulo nodding his head.
And I want you to think about how you feel when you're reading these statements. Personally, when I read some of them in the older student column, I am taken right back to middle school math in 7th grade with Miss Struble. And I loved Miss Struble. I thought she was the greatest math teacher in the world. And I was in what they called advanced math at the time, and I cringe using that phrase now, but that's what it was. So Miss Struble was just such an amazing teacher, an amazing person. And I remember that she made me feel like I was the kind of person who could do well in math. She made me feel that way as a student. So if you had asked me as a student then how I would respond to that, I probably would have said always, right? If I had to answer that survey question. But if you asked me at that time in 7th grade, whether or not if I couldn't do a math problem, did I have strategies and pathways to keep trying different ideas, I would have said never. I only knew the procedures that I was taught. I was really great at the standard algorithms that I was taught. So I did not have any other way to solve problems than what Ms. Struble had taught me. I think that these types of questions can give you great insights about your students' past math experiences, as well as their attitudes towards math. How do they feel about themselves as mathematicians? So we encourage you to not only reflect on your own math identity by answering these questions, but to find out more about your students by presenting them to your class.
Our next great idea is incorporating journaling in math. And journaling really provides students an opportunity to reflect on their learning and on their own beliefs. Journaling in math is usually content specific, but it can also be a great opportunity to learn about your students' identities. So this great idea, we're going to give you some journal prompts that you can sprinkle into your math journaling. Take a moment and read over these prompts. I'll give you about 10 seconds. So you'll notice that these prompts are designed to gauge students' productive and unproductive beliefs about math. And so we encourage you, if you give these prompts, obviously not to give them all at once, but kind of sprinkle them into your current journaling. The reflections can be really brief, a couple sentences. Students can also be and should be encouraged to have choice when they journal, so they don't always have to be writing. They could be drawing, they could be bulleting, other forms of expression. And now we have so many great tech tools, so students could journal using a video platform. And Doug Fisher talked about maximizing every single minute of the school day. So we love the idea of incorporating more writing into math class. It's something that used to be really common, I think. I know when I went to school with Marilyn Burns, it was a big thing. And so I would love to bring some more writing back into math class. And then we also encourage you to use read alouds to prompt questions about student identity. And Diana and I both love this new book, I'm Trying to Love Math, about an alien. And it just, gets those prompts going too and incorporates, English language arts into math, which should be happening more frequently. So we're going to take a moment to pause and ponder. We want to hear from you. We've given you lots of ideas about how to learn more about your students' identities. And we want to know, how can learning about your students' identities impact your math instruction? So feel free to take a moment to think. We want to give you some think time and then drop some thoughts into the chat.
Yeah, we can use this to plan our instruction. I love that. Yeah, let's anticipate challenges, build on their strengths. Thanks, Jen. Choosing appropriate content based on how kids view math. Right, where do their interests lie?
Yeah, Doug Fisher talked a lot about relevance and students really needing to find relevance in the curriculum to be engaged and to really believe in themselves. So we think it'd be a great idea to use some of these things and not just gather the data, but then actually put it into practice.
Thank you all for these great ideas. Please continue to drop them in the chat. So our next question to address is, who are our families? And we know that relationships matter a lot, and they're at the heart of the work that we do as teachers. So every day, building relationships with students, our colleagues, and we're actually building relationships with families as well, whether we realize it or not. So in this section, we really want you to be intentional about creating relationships with your students, but and their families, and reaching out to families in meaningful ways. The best classrooms are ones that are built on a mutual respect between parent and teacher. So I'm going to read this quote to you quickly. Study after study shows us that there is a strong relationship between parental involvement and children's self-efficacy in mathematics, and ultimately improvement in their mathematical achievement. And we knew before the pandemic that we needed to do a better job of letting parents know about shifts in mathematical education. And when relationships with parents are nurtured, children are better able to perform tasks in the math classroom, and ultimately their achievement improves, which is what we want. So teachers can build relationships with families by asking about their past experiences as learners and how they engage with their children in mathematical experiences at home.
Diana and I play this Incredibles clip for our math methods students, and many of them tell us that this exact scene played out in their house when they were growing up, especially as they were getting into higher level math classes. So we're going to play this 30-second clip for you.
We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image.
That's not the way you're supposed to do it, Dad. They want us to do it this
I don't
way.
know that way. Why would they change math? Math is
It's
math.
okay,
Math
Dad.
is math.
I'll just wait for Mom to get back.
What? Well, she won't understand it any better than I do.
Math is math. So how many people can relate to that video? So just as your students have had like a variety of, oh, sorry, it's okay. Just as your students have had a variety of experiences from the past year, families have a variety of feelings about their relationship with not only mathematics, but helping their child with math. So here are some memes that have been posted on social media during the past school year. And I kind of got like a little bit obsessed with collecting them because I just thought they were really interesting. So take a second to read them, see if you can relate to any of them as a teacher or a family member.
We agree, Heather. They are hilarious.
So as we talk about partnering with families in this next section, there were a lot of feelings happening from families. And I love that the one, and I'm dating myself, but the Adam Sandler meme on the previous slide, you know, because some families are really trying to learn the math at home, a lot of families. And so we want you to remember a few things as we kind of approach this section and just be mindful of. We want you to recognize that there was learning taking place at home during the pandemic. It might have been curriculum based. It also just might have been what Doug Fisher calls unexpected learning. And I know that many families and students had to unexpectedly learn a lot of technology during the pandemic. Many students had to unexpectedly learn how to cook. I know my own boys unexpectedly learned how to be really, really great at Minecraft. And so, you know, we have to honor those efforts made by families and students, regardless of perceived deficits in curriculum type math. And we want also to, you know, remember to prepare. You've got to prepare yourself to address some misconceptions or unfinished learning when students return to school, but addressing that in a respectful way when dealing with families.
Which leads us to our next bright idea. So bright idea number 4 is to connect with families and to ask for feedback. And I think sometimes it's difficult for people in general, not just teachers, to ask for feedback. And bright idea 4 challenges you to connect with families and really ask them what their needs are and how they think things are going. I remember as a classroom teacher, I used to send surveys home to families on or around parent-teacher conferences. So the report cards would go home and then I would send this survey out to families asking them for feedback. And I would ask them questions like, how do you feel your child is doing in math or in ELA? Are you happy with the amount of communication that I'm sending home? How do you feel your child is doing? Do you have any suggestions? And additionally, I asked them what they thought I could do as a teacher to improve their child's experience in my class. And I remember excitedly sharing this idea with some of my colleagues and the other teachers in my buildings who looked at me so puzzled and wondering why I would ever do such a thing. And yes, I'm human, right? I like to be validated for my efforts, and it's really scary to invite in opinions that might challenge the work that you do. But ultimately, the feedback that I got from those families was so important for my planning. I learned about what families were struggling with at home, and I reflected on that feedback and used it to become a better teacher, a better support for my students, and a partner to the families. So I truly believe that asking for feedback is one of the best ways that you can build community in your classroom. But surveys are not just for students. So yes, we want to survey our students and get to know about them, but we can also survey our families and find out more about the people who are taking care of those children who are in our class. So I'm going to share a couple of different resources with you that we have included on that resource document. And the first one is this math experience survey that was adapted from the book Partnering with Parents in Elementary School Math. And I'm going to click on it just so you can see what the Google form looks like that will be shared with you. So this particular survey would be sent to parents at the beginning of the school year. And the first set of questions ask parents about them. So what was your school life like when you were a child? Maybe you have parents and caretakers who never attended school. And these are important things that you should know when you're planning instruction for your students. What was your attitude towards math as a child and as an adult, right? And has there been a change in your attitude towards math? And the next set of questions asks for some input about children's attitudes towards math. So, how do you support your child's understanding of math at home? So this survey, you are welcome to make a copy of it and change some of the questions if you think it might be useful for you to send home with your students' families at the beginning of the year. There are also surveys at the mid-year point as well as the end of the year that you'll receive in that resource document. But again, keep in mind that you should ask for feedback often and send these periodically if you are truly committed to that growth. The next survey that we found was pretty interesting. This was a math perception survey for families, and it was developed by a school district. And they used a platform called SurveyMonkey to send it out to their families. So it looks like this would have been sent out to elementary and middle school families. And once they got, the basic demographic information, they got to some questions like, how satisfied are you with your child's math education? What's your child's comfort level with the curriculum? And I'm going to scroll down a little bit to point out the questions beginning at question number 13 here. This district in particular wanted to host some events for families to attend where they could get information about the curriculum materials. Maybe they wanted to host a family game night that involved math, a Q&A session with some resources, or a refresher course where they would actually help parents with some of the math content that their children were exposed to in the classroom. And so they first asked, what would you attend? Are you even interested in this? You have these grand ideas, but really it's important to know what people would be interested in attending before you actually go ahead with it. And then the other question that's great is that what times you want to ask your families, what times would you be available? Because we need to be mindful of work schedules and everything. All families look different. And I love question number 15. Which of these present an obstacle to attending a math workshop? Is it childcare? Is it transportation, mealtime, or work? And if it's mealtime, that's something you could plan for as a teacher, as a school community, and really, take that into account when you're organizing these types of events. During the pandemic, teachers got really creative and sought, opportunities to host virtual math nights. And those are really a real and exciting possibility for districts now. So even if you are unable to gather in person, I encourage you to think outside the box a little bit about how you can create those opportunities to build community, even if it's virtual.
since we want to validate and honor the learning that took place at home and also connect with families and get to know them. So our next great idea is to ask students to make connections between math and their lives outside of school. So before I talk more about this bright idea, I want to encourage you to join Twitter in a professional capacity because there is an amazing community of math educators on Twitter. Many use the hashtag acronym Math Twitter Blogosphere. It's at the top of this page. So if you type that in the search engine, you'll see a ton of people to follow. And my advice is just like look at who they follow and kind of go from there. And I encourage you to follow a diverse group of educators on Twitter. But I also love the hashtag elementary math chat. So every Thursday evening at 9 p.m. throughout the school year, they have a different topic about elementary math. And it's great. And if you miss it, they save them all. And so I encourage you to join that community. It really is an inspiring place, the math Twitter community. So anyway, I saw this tweet last year. It made me think about our definition of math, like math is math, like what is math and what do we value as math as teachers? So this woman, Christine Roberts, tweeted, we can value students by asking them where they see and do math in their families, culture, language, and communities. I think our definition of what math is and where it is done is too limiting and often only reflect school math. And so Doug Fisher mentioned yesterday about relevance, again, its impact on student engagement. So the next few activities are going to allow you to get to know your students and how they see math in their lives and their families and their communities. So this first activity is called Math is Everywhere, and it has students thinking about the ways they see math in their everyday lives. Super simple. So maybe instead of a bag of me, they're bringing in math items or drawing pictures, and then you're hanging it up on the bulletin board. And so students can see, where is math in everyone else's life and where do they see math and how do they see math? Is it only in shapes or is it only in numbers? And we know math is bigger than that. So this is a great way to get to know your students and how they see the world of math. You could create a math selfie board. So this is another hashtag. This school district has great math stuff going on, but their teachers created math selfie boards at the beginning of the year. So encourage students to do math around the house, see math around the house, see math in their communities. This particular teacher was checking off the box about arrays in the grocery store. And so this is a great thing that you could do. Students could record their responses again on Flipgrid, Seesaw. Now that we have all these technology tools under our belt, it's a great way to get to know students and see how they see math, maybe outside of the home too. And then I love how this teacher created books. Every student had to submit a photograph that showed an intersection of geometry and an aspect of their culture. And then she put the book together. And it was kind of a classroom book. And she did this for multiple math units. So she did another one following this on patterns. And I loved this idea. It's super simple. And again, you could utilize technology for this if you wanted to as well. And Diana has an amazing example. I was talking about this and then she popped up this idea from a student last semester. So she's going to tell you more about that.
Yeah, and so one of my students who's actually graciously joined us today, she was challenged with the task of creating an activity to send home with the students so that they could complete it with their families. And last year, all students, actually, I think most of her students were virtual. So it was sent home on Seesaw and she had to create like an example for them. So she asked children to recall a recently taught geometry lesson on the study of angles and the study of lines. And then she provided reminders on where they could find reteaching videos in Seesaw. So then she asked them to find items around their house or in their communities that were examples of lines or angles that were discussed. So this snap and chat geometry lesson challenged kids to have conversations with their families about math and culture, and then used it as an opportunity for students to get to learn about each other. So this future difference maker, like I said, has graciously joined our session today and has given me permission to share the example that she created as a model for her students with all of you. So I'm going to click on this. And if you can't hear it for some reason, just let us know.
Hi, friends. So, looking at the photo I posted, you can see that there are parallel lines in my braids and also some angles in my earrings. So, I will tell you why I really like the lines and angles in my hair and earrings. For me and my culture, hair is important. I love my curls. I love the different styles I can do with my hair, and the lines and angles that are put into your hair for a different style gives you a different look. It shows creativity. It shows a little pizzazz. I love it. I really love that about my hair and my hair culture. And the earrings I really like because it's a symbol of Montessori. So before I even came to Montessori, before I knew what Montessori was, I loved these earrings. I was like, yes, peace. We all need peace, right? So when I came to Montessori, someone's like, "Oh, your earrings are so cool. They're a symbol of Montessori." I'm like, "Hey, you're right." So those are the angles and lines that are important to me and my culture. Yours might be different, and that's okay. You can be as creative as you want. You can use anything. You could be goofy. It could be something like the perpendicular line that the basketball hoop makes to the court. Because if it was a parallel line, then could you play basketball? No. And who doesn't like to play basketball or at least watch it? So I want the families to have fun with this. Students, this is an opportunity for you to show your parents what you know and teach them about the lines and angles you have learned about in school. And parents and family members, this is an opportunity for you to teach your child about how what they've learned in math class is actually still important outside of the math class. Where do we see math? Where is math important to us in real life? I just thought that you guys would have fun with this. I hope you enjoy. Bye. Hi, friends.
Sorry about that. And back to the presentation. Oops, I'll go back. So I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. This student is bound to be a wonderful teacher. You can see how much she cares about her students and honoring their culture. So I hope you are inspired by it as I was. Great idea number 6 is to ask students to interview their family members. So another way to get to know students and connect math to everyday life is by asking students to record a video interview in which they ask a family member, tell me about yourself and how do you use mathematics every day or in your everyday life? So I'm going to play another short video clip of one of my former students. This student is a little bit younger, but she interviewed her mom and asked her this very question. And again, if you can't hear it for some reason, just let us know.
Hey, Mommy, how do you use math tools?
Well, I use math tools when I'm trying to figure out like a recipe with the serving size. And since we're a family of 5, sometimes I have to double up on recipes. So I have to use math to figure out which ingredients and how much to put in. But I also use math when I go grocery shopping and I'm trying to figure out how much our grocery bill will be and how much things are going to cost. And then at work, I use math a lot when I'm trying to figure out selling prescriptions to different doctors and understanding numbers and seeing where kind of sales I need to achieve. So it's really important to have a really good solid math foundation so you have helpful tools in your everyday life. Okay?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Sorry if that video was a little bit quiet, but it's just another way that you can make those connections between students and parents. Great idea number 7 is to share math role models and their stories. So if you went to one of your students and said, who is one of your role models, it's more likely that they would give you the name of a famous athlete, artist, actor, musician than it would be for them to name a mathematician or a scientist. And when I was younger, one of my role models was Princess Diana, probably had something to do with her name, but it was partly because her passing was big news when I was an elementary school student. But as I learned about her values and who she was as a person, I realized there was much more to that role model than I even thought initially. So I'm willing to, I think that we need to teach students about mathematicians and have them portrayed in the books that we read, and have conversations about those mathematicians so that they can see role models in other areas. So we came up with some of our famous, our favorite books of famous mathematicians, or where math is presented in literature. And we want to ask ourselves these questions. What does a mathematician look like? And how do people use math in their everyday lives? How do people display habits of math in their lives? So role models aren't just celebrities and famous people, but math role models could be kids too, just like there are kids in our classrooms. So on this slide, you may wish to take a screenshot of it, but we'll also give you some links to where you can find books that humanize math. And the stories that are on this screen, they teach us that math is not just about speed, that it's okay if you're not able to solve a problem right away. You might have to work at it and struggle for a little while before you can solve it. And math is something that we do each and every day. So in real life, math's not a worksheet or a timed test. It really stems from curiosity. So again, we encourage you to check out these stories, as well as the Storytelling Math series, which is a new series of books that show that all children can be mathematical thinkers, and includes examples of activities that you can do as a family.
So we're going to take another moment to pause and ponder, and we'd love for you to think about this and then type your response in the chat. How might learning about your students' families and or communities impact your math instruction?
Helps us understand expectations and background.
And I think we need to keep revisiting that definition of math and, school math versus math outside of the real world, and kind of bring that into our classroom, and not just for a token activity here and there, but really integrate it into what we're doing in every math unit that we do. So next we want to shift and talk about your math class. Who are we? Who is your math community? So at the beginning of the presentation, we asked you to share your responses about math community. And in one moment, I'm going to paste that on our slide.
We have to refresh. Give me one moment. There we go.
All right, here we go. So just take a few seconds to look over this. These are your amazing responses.
Virtually. Did we ever think we'd include that
I know.
a year ago?
Right.
I love
And
that.
if you have any reactions to any of this, please respond in the chat. So our classroom communities were really transformed over the past school year. And we know teachers really rallied to create an inclusive and safe learning environment, even online. So as we prepare to go back to the school year, we think it's really important to be really intentional about setting goals for your math community. and making sure that students feel a sense of belonging from day one.
Bright idea number 8 is to co-construct norms for math class. At the beginning of the school year, teachers often default to discussing rules. Don't run in the hall, push in your chair, and compliance is sometimes prioritized over connection and can disrupt community. So instead, we need to be intentional about constructing norms with students that will help build these connections and ultimately build student agency. So what are norms? Well, norms are statements of value or behavior that support equitable participation in the classroom. They set expectations for all members of the classroom community, adults and students. Class norms are stated in a positive tone, apply to all situations all the time, and are few in number. Here are some examples of norms that you might want to emphasize in your math classroom. They might be different from what you experienced as a math student, and that's okay. And Joe Bowler created a document that gives teachers ideas on how they can engage students in experiences that will address each of these norms in the slide. So we've included the link with our resources that we will share with you.
Co-constructing norms is great, and but we want them to be more than a list of things that just hang on your wall. We want students to experience these norms for themselves and really own them, be able to identify when they are actually doing the norms, and even set goals for themselves with some of these norms. If you watched Doug Fisher's presentation yesterday, the one part that really stood out to me was Esmeralda and her teacher and her discussing the norm of mistakes is okay. And so we need to incorporate some of those things into our math routines from the beginning of the school year so that students can practice and it becomes a natural part of the school day. So we encourage you to use math routines instead of a traditional warm up or going over homework. Math routines are really short, 5 to 10 minutes, and they help make math thinking visible. They allow all students to participate in a way that makes sense to them. So we first want you to think about being intentional about planning your math routines. So we are going to share a goal planning sheet with you from I Am Math. So as you're planning your math routines, you can integrate the norms that you really want to focus on. We also want you to use math routines that you want to use all year. And that's something that Doug Fisher also talked about yesterday, maximizing instructional time. So we want you to choose routines that students can learn, and then you can repeat them time after time. And we're going to link some math routines in our resource document. We have a few listed here. There are so many and so many great ones. So if there's something that we don't link for you and you're looking for it and you want more info, chances are Diana and I have about 25 links to share with you on each specific math routine. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need more info. But we encourage you to model norms with think alouds during these math routines. We're all human. And, you know, I still get frustrated a lot of times when I make mistakes. And so I think that it's important to show that human side to your students and be real. And so as you're going through these math routines, like students need to see that you're a human being and these are normal things that we all feel about math sometimes. And then not only how am I feeling, but then what can I do about it? So setting norm goals, reminding students and reinforcing math behaviors. And then just remembering that norms can change. You can add norms, you can change norms. This should be fluid with your students learning and growing throughout the year. This is an example of a math routine that you could do at the beginning of the school year. Very engaging. So just take a second to read over it and maybe type a response really quickly in the chat. And I would encourage you to justify your thinking. So make sure you can tell us why. So I'd love to see some numbers on there, Heather. How many minutes would you spend brushing and how many minutes would you spend swimming? Thank you.
Oh, Kelly, that's interesting. You can plug your nose when you're brushing. Maybe not taste it.
I love that reasoning.
I don't like being cold either.
So I had this, you can continue to type in the chat if you want, but I had this pulled up on my computer while I was prepping for this presentation, and my 5th grade son came over and read it. I asked him to answer the question and justify his answers. He told me he'd spend 2 minutes brushing his teeth because that's what his Sonicare toothbrush was programmed to do, and that he would spend 8 minutes swimming because he took swimming lessons this summer in a really cold pool. And he loves swimming, so he thinks that he could do more time swimming. And so I loved listening to his reasoning, as I do love listening to all kids talk about math. But the funny part is, as he said, why are you looking at this in the first place? And that's a common question with me as a teacher, like, what are you doing? But I said, it's a math problem. And he said, what? It's a math problem? And I said, yeah, it's encouraging students to come up with ways to make 10. And also you have to justify your answer. And he said, wow, I didn't even realize I was doing math. And, he's going into 5th grade and was super engaged by this question. But I think that sometimes these are the perfect things to do at the beginning of the year to get to work. You could assess kids and they don't even know they're doing math. So many norms can be embedded in this routine. Different answers is acceptable. It's okay to have different strategies, different justifications. We can learn from each other this year. Thinking is more important than speed. So thinking about just how you can pull out those norms and also learn about your students and keep them engaged. And just a reminder to think about really the little things that you expect students to do in math and how it reflects the values that you want them to take away from your math community. So, if you're asking students to raise their hands really high up as fast as possible, what are you really valuing as a math teacher? And so Diana and I love math talks, number talks. And one of the key aspects of that is just kind of a private thumbs up at the chest when you have an answer. And so these are just a tweet that just made me think of that. So are we really giving students enough think time? Are we really thinking about ideas of equity and participation? And then I love this bottom tweet, we want to highlight students' personal points of power in math, and we want them to realize it too. So I love that this woman had a student who said, oh, me, I just love a good challenge. That's what we want our students to walk away with and talk about themselves, these personal points of power.
Our next bright idea also builds community. A pledge is a promise that somebody is going to do something. So declaring your intentions helps keep community at the forefront of teaching and learning. And posting promises in the classroom and referring to them when kids need redirection are ways to honor and maintain those shared agreements. On the right, you'll see some examples of statements that you could include in your math pledge. And much like norms, you can discuss these with students and create them together by asking questions while they are working on math. So for example, what does a good mathematician look like and sound like? What behaviors do mathematicians demonstrate? And if children are working on a math activity, you might want to walk around and take pictures of them practicing these behaviors to include with your statements on a math pledge.
So we're going to take a moment to do our final pause and ponder. How might you build math community in your math classroom this year? Take about 30 seconds and drop your ideas and
math journals, encouraging students to support each other.
Yeah, and one thing I think my math method students are always surprised at the beginning of the year. We spend a lot of time building community at the beginning of the year and talking about our identities as mathematicians. And I think they're really shocked that that's what we're going to do. I think they're very nervous that we're just going to do math, like really hard math on the first day, and they're going to feel like really anxious. And so I think it's important, especially coming back from the last school year, to really just create a welcoming environment for everybody. And, we're all in this together kind of feeling. So in this last section, we want you to think about where you're going this school year. You have goals, curriculum goals. You have goals to get to know your students. You have goals to set norms, build a safe community. But you do have to teach math, and you do have required content. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So our last bright idea 11, is to adhere to grade level content. The media has been using phrases such as learning loss or learning gaps. And we know as educators, we are not going to adopt those deficit viewpoints, but we might feel internal or external pressure to kind of catch kids back up or go back to where kids' perceived math levels are, and really just only focus on remediation. And so you're going to hear the phrase accelerate learning this year a lot. And there's evidence that we should be accelerating learning. That means focusing on grade level content and providing just-in-time supports. And that's going to be more effective than just focusing on remediation. So according to data from Zern last year, which is an online math program, students who experienced learning acceleration struggled less and learned more than students who started at the same level but experienced remediation instead. Students of color and those from low-income backgrounds were more likely than their white, wealthier peers to experience remediation, even when they had already demonstrated success on grade level content. And learning acceleration was particularly effective for students of color and those from low-income families. And so we want to keep these things in mind when we are teaching next year. Also, according to NCTM, or the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, we really need to focus on grade level content. We want to build that coherence. We want to support and scaffold. And in future sessions, we're going to be talking more about math instruction. So please check back with us for a future session. And we want to leave you kind of with this quote. We love this quote from Doug Fisher's Rebound book. We need to resist the urge to focus on gaps, remediation, and lowered expectations. If there was ever a time to believe in the capabilities of our students and ourselves, it is now. And so we really hope that you gathered some ideas from today's session, and that you can go out kind of believing in those students, getting to know them, and really making that a priority at the beginning of the year.
As we mentioned at the beginning, we want to sustain professional development throughout the school year. So we've scheduled a series of follow-up sessions throughout the fall semester that we'd love for you to attend. You'll need to register for each of the follow-up sessions through Buffalo State's PDS website, and a link to register will be posted soon. But session 2 and 3 and 4 will all be on Zoom, and the dates are listed there, as well as the topics. Session 4 is to be determined based on your needs. So we'll survey you towards the end of session 3 and just find out what you'd be interested in learning more about. And those sessions will take place from 4:30 until 5:30, just because we know that many of you are going back to work and might need a few moments to use the bathroom or have a snack before you sign on for professional development. So we are going to drop the link to our resources in the chat. And I believe we'll be able to email those to you as well. So we'll make sure that you get it, even if you are not able to open it up right away through the chat. So I encourage you to check those out, ask questions, follow up with us if you need to. But everything that you need from today's session will be on that Google document. And if you are on Twitter, we would love for you to share your ideas and efforts with us. So you can use the hashtag AHOD, all hands on deck, AHOD math, to carry on the conversation. Our email addresses are listed on this slide, as well as our Twitter handles. I think Liza Bair is a little bit more active on Twitter than I am, but you are welcome to follow me as well. And we really would love to hear from you and give you encouragement as you begin your school year. So Please don't forget to complete our session feedback survey following today's session. So we could also drop that link for you in the chat. And it's been a pleasure having you here today. We want to give a special shout out to our colleagues, Pixita and Kelly, for helping us with the logistics of this presentation. And on behalf of Buffalo State, the School of Education, PDS, we want to thank our colleagues and school partners for attending our session today and for being partners with us. We are really in awe of what you do as teachers and for your students. Thank you for believing in them and honoring them and empowering them to believe in themselves as mathematicians. We wish you all the best as you venture into a new school year, and we hope you decide to come back and join us again on September 22nd for our first follow-up session.
Hey, thank you, Diana, Liza. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
you.
Heather. Can't wait to check Twitter.
Heather's really good at Twitter. Should follow her too.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for coming.
It was so good. You guys should feel great about what you did.
Thanks, Heather.
Yes, absolutely.
It means
Have
a
a great
lot
day.
coming from you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Stop. Bye.